أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum to viewers and listeners. This is study number 11 of the Ramadan Daily Quran studies of the year 2020. And I am Zahid Aziz, and I'm delivering these for the MV Anjuman Ishat Islam Lahore, UK. In this study 11, we're continuing the subject of the last four studies. And we continue here with the words of the verse from the last study. That verse was in chapter 3, and it's 187, and the particular words were فَنَبَذُوهُ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ وَاشْتَرَوْا بِهِ ثَمَنًا قَلِيلًا. That instead of explaining the book of God to people, they threw it behind their backs and took a small price for it. In study number 9, the one before the last one, we quoted Jesus from the Gospels, where he condemned the behavior of the Jewish religious leaders by saying, "You nullify the word of God for the sake of your traditions, and you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions." And this is the same as throwing the book of God behind one's back. And therefore, the statement made in the Quran about the Israelites was also confirmed by Jesus 600 years before the Quran came into the world, that this indeed did happen, that they threw it behind their backs and took a small price for it. As regards taking a small price for the book of God, this reminds us of the well-known incident of Jesus and the money changers in the Jewish temple, an incident which is reported in all the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I'll read it out to you from Matthew chapter 21. Then Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who were selling and buying in the temple. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He said to them, "It is written," in other words, it is written by God, "My house shall be a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." So this is in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you can see the references in the written version of this study. According to the version in John, Jesus also said to the sellers who were selling in the temple, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." Gospel of John chapter 2. Now these activities in the temple, they symbolized replacing religious observances by trading and the making of money. And we might call this selling out religion for material gain. And that is a small price, because religious truths and observances have far greater value than these material gains. Now, the Quran mentions the wrongs committed by the Israelites after the time of Moses in order to warn Muslims that they too would commit similar wrongs. And the Muslims of later times then ignored the Quran, and they placed Islamic jurisprudence known as fiqh, they placed that above the Quran. Now, these books of Islamic jurisprudence were compiled by eminent and sincere Muslim scholars between 1 and 200 years after the Holy Prophet's time. In these books, rulings were given on all aspects of life of a Muslim, religious or worldly, for a Muslim to follow. No doubt these rulings were based on the Quran and on some of the actions and sayings of the Holy Prophet that these compilers knew of. But still, these were human judgments prone to error. And moreover, later on, when new world circumstances arose, in particular with the rise of modern Western civilization in the last 3 centuries, many of these rulings in these books of fiqh became quite inappropriate, inapplicable to life, and even sounding absurd. The issues on which the old Islamic fiqh no longer provided useful guidance to Muslims, and in fact, it was doing them harm now. The issues included the following: relations between Muslims and non-Muslims, the meaning of jihad, freedom of religion, and the rights of women. These are among the issues on which the old fiqh was now doing more harm than good. Yet people relied on these books for their knowledge of Islam. Allama Dr. Sir Muhammad Iqbal has also pointed out this problem in his well-known book or series of lectures published as The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. He writes this, and I quote him, "But with all their comprehensiveness, these systems are, after all, individual interpretations, and as such cannot claim any finality. I know that the ulama of Islam claim finality for the popular schools of Muslim law. But since things have changed, and the world of Islam is confronted and affected today by new forces set free by the extraordinary development of human thought in all its directions, I see no reason why this attitude should be maintained any longer." He means the attitude that what is in those books of Islamic jurisprudence and fiqh is final and cannot be revised or changed. And then Iqbal goes on to mention the damage done by adherence to those books of Islamic law. And what he writes is this: in the Punjab, as everybody knows, there have been cases in which Muslim women wishing to get rid of undesirable husbands have been driven to apostasy. Nothing could be more distant from the aims of a missionary religion. That's what he writes. In other words, how could Islamic teachings create a situation where people are deserting the religion of Islam, which cannot possibly be the aim of Islam as a missionary religion, to drive people out of it? And what Iqbal here is referring to is that under the Islamic law as enshrined in these books, a woman had no right to claim divorce. A Muslim woman, had no right to claim divorce. So in some cases, Muslim women who wanted a justified divorce, justified by their circumstances, they went to the extent of changing their religion and leaving Islam. That meant that their marriage to the Muslim husband could be dissolved on the basis of religion. So this was the tragic situation. Also, the interpretations given in these books of Islamic law were influenced by the circumstances and prejudices of those times. And actually the same applies to us, to the interpretation that we give. that they are influenced by the circumstances of our time and certain prevailing prejudices. We are not immune from them. And what Maulana Muhammad Ali writes about this is this: the causes of the early Islamic wars have been greatly misunderstood. These reports were compiled in an age when the rule of Islam had been established and the mentality of the Muslims had become the same as that of ruling nations who do not consider it wrong at all to treat other nations unjustly. So it was with that mentality that some of these rulings and judgments in books of Islamic law about the treatment of non-Muslims and war against them, it was in those circumstances that those rulings had been given. And this was how jihad came to be misrepresented in the books of Islamic law as war to be conducted against non-Muslim nations until they were conquered. In those books of Islamic jurisprudence, you find that they devise the concept that the whole world is divided rigidly into two zones, one called Darul Islam. Darul Islam. This is not Darussalam. Darul Islam, the abode of Islam, and the other called Darul Harb, the abode of war. The world was divided into these two zones, Muslim lands and others. And Muslims were supposed to be at war against all countries in this second zone, this so-called abode of war. There is no justification for such an idea in the Quran or in sound Hadith reports. And in modern times, this kind of division and belief would mean that Muslims could not live as citizens of non-Muslim countries, as in Europe and America, because they would be at war with the country in which they were living and whose citizens they were. So with that, I bring to a close study number 11. Wa akhiru du'ana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.